Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Janet Zarkin, a fellow with the Educator Collaborative, and you are here for this session with Dr. Lois Barker, who's going to be doing a book talk or book talks on legacy, advocacy, and gentrification. I am going to bring Dr. Barker up now. And here she is. And before she gets started, just a few reminders. Um, Please watch using YouTube, and that way you can join our chat. It's really makes it more engaging and exciting to hear from you and see what you're thinking. And also remember to, just remember that to look at the selected charities for today and enjoy the session with Dr. Barker.
Thank you, Janet. All right. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. I will be sharing 6 books with you today that explore these ideas, these themes of legacy, advocacy, and gentrification. And before I jump in, I always like to do a little storytelling. The reason why I selected these 3 topics or themes, or however you want to, call it, legacy, advocacy, and gentrification, because they are really personal to me, and they've been growing on me for the last 3 to 4 years. And so I'm going to start off with legacy. I've been talking a lot about legacy with my family and friends, and what I've come to realize sometimes, and especially as we've seen some of our literary greats go on to the afterlife, become elders, some of the actors and actresses that have shaped us growing up go on to become ancestors. I started thinking about legacy and having this conversation with friends and colleagues. How do you define legacy? What does legacy mean to you? If you were to become an ancestor today, what would that look like, right? And so I started thinking about how a lot of people saw legacy as material things. Well, I'm leaving all of this stock for my children. I'm leaving all of my insurance policies and my savings. And I just kept on hearing material and material and material things. And then I'm sitting there like, well, to me, legacy is my character. Legacy is the work that I've done to make this world a better place. Legacy is the work that I've poured into education advocacy to make sure teachers have policies that no longer infringe on their autonomy, right? And students have the freedom to choose what they read. Legacy is through my children, right? Have I given them the tools to become servant leaders, to become better people? Legacy is the stories I leave behind and the history that they pass on. And so as I was thinking through what legacy meant, some of these books started coming into my life, and some of these books were already there, and they became a part of today's curation. Advocacy. I am in Texas right now, and we have so many policies out there dictating what our history should look like. The removal of key terms and key people and key movements, and the whitewashing of the foundation, some of the foundational things of this country to make it more pleasant, when history is not always about the feel goods. And so I find myself advocating, joining with organizations to make sure that our children know the truth, they have choice, and they become critical thinkers. And outside of that educational advocacy, I think about community advocacy in connection with gentrification. So when I think of the word gentrification, it also, like I go into the dictionary and it's like gentrification is repair, right? To improve. But oftentimes, especially in Black and brown neighborhoods, gentrification comes with displacement. It is not for the sole purpose of improving these communities, improving homes, improving businesses, to bring life back into these communities, to ensure that these communities can retain their histories and their culture, but it's to push them out, because these developers come in, buy up the older homes with all of the character, fit 6 homes in 1 square lot, and raise the prices, and people can no longer afford to live in those communities, right? And so then the advocacy piece comes in, where it's like, how do we stop these developments? How do we keep the local businesses afloat when you have the chain restaurants and the chain supermarkets coming in? And that too, again, is personal to me. I grew up in the Caribbean, Grenada to be specific, and my dad had a grocery store. And for the longest while, his grocery store was foundational to our community. Everybody came to that grocery store, kids on the way to school and back home to stop for snacks. And slowly but surely, in the larger town, about 15 minutes away from my dad's grocery store, a big supermarket opened up. And they were offering more product than my dad could afford to offer. They were extending credits to buyers, and he could not extend that much credit. And loyal customers began to leave us and go towards that supermarket. And sure enough, my dad had to shut down his business, and our whole life changed, right? And so all of these topics are personal, and they pop up in some of these books I've curated for you. And I do invite you to jump into the chat as I share some of these books. If you've read them, if there's something similar, how have they personally connected to you for the rest of the time we have together. Okay. So the first set I have, the first book I want to feature is fairly new. It's called Main Street, written by two favorite people of mine, Britt Hawthorne and Tiffany Joel. And this book tells the story of a little girl, Olivia, and she's so thrilled to invite her friends to the 62nd annual Main Street block party, a huge block party that's been happening in her community until a classmate, Allison, a white classmate, tells her that she can't come because her mom says Main Street isn't safe. This hurts and confuses Olivia, and she turns to her elderly neighbor, Miss Effie, who shares the story of how her own family was once denied a bank loan because their neighborhood was marked in red on a government map. Through Miss Effie's memories, Olivia learns how neighborhoods organized, pooled their resources, and fought back against the discriminatory practice of redlining. The story does not end in defeat, but in celebration and proof that community resilience can outlast injustice. And so it's, while the book, I've tagged it as general or elementary, it's really a very great conversational piece, a great entry into this topic of redlining and discriminatory practices and government policies that you can use regardless of grade level or age range. And so how does this connect to legacy, advocacy, and gentrification? So we see legacy in this book through intergenerational storytelling. Miss Effie passes such great history on to Olivia, like the history of the neighborhood, the community, government policies. She has witnessed it as a child, as an adult, and she is passing these stories on to Olivia. And I love that idea of intergenerational storytelling because, again, like I said, when I sat with my colleagues and we talked about legacy, it's passing on the histories and stories of places to our children, to the children that we come in contact with. Because again, we live in a society right now where things are getting rephrased and a lot of things are getting hidden. And so it's really important to have our elders keep these stories alive and pass the information on to the youth. In this book, we see advocacy introduced to collective neighborhood organizing. There's a lot of organizing across the generations to really fight back against discriminatory practices. And it really plants early seeds for understanding how gentrification grows from the same roots as discriminatory housing policy. A lot of these policies are not separate. They all work together to isolate, most of the times, Black and Brown communities and make it impossible for us to have access to prime real estate, to develop our own communities and to be successful. The next book I'm going to introduce us to is called Ruby Lost and Found. 13-year-old Ruby Chu is adrift after the death of her beloved grandfather, Yi, whose epic scavenger hunts once made San Francisco feel like home. Friendships are fracturing. Her sister is leaving for college. Ruby lands in trouble at school, and so her parents send her off to her grandmother to spend the summer in Chinatown. This is where Ruby, not by choice, discovers a vibrant community of elders and an unsuspected friendship with a classmate named Liam, and a neighborhood bakery that's been priced out of existence. As Ruby traces these scavenger hunt maps, she begins to find her way through grief and back to herself. Again, we see this idea of legacy coming through our elders. And so Ruby lives, like, she goes through her grandfather's scavenger hunts, and then she gets to experience this cultural memory of Chinatowns through the elder community that she meets through her grandmother. Advocacy shows up in this book when Ruby and Liam rally to save a local bakery from closure. Gentrification is felt when this local business is being displaced by rising costs. And again, this is something that is happening in a lot of our communities across the country, and in other parts of the globe as well. We often see bigger businesses, developments coming in, raising the cost of rent, raising taxes, and local businesses that have been there for centuries can no longer survive. And so we see Ruby just tapping back into her heritage, tapping back into her culture, and becoming an advocate and working really hard to keep this bakery open. So in this first set, thinking about some cross-curricular projects, right? These are three things that came to mind as I'm reading this book. Now, I'll be very transparent. Main Street has a trim, they have a Tiffany and Britt. They worked really hard and put together a beautiful teacher's guide. So if you go to Penguin, you can download that teacher's guide, and it's really thorough and beautiful. So if you're interested in using Main Street in your classroom, there's a teacher's guide that's well put together, very intentional, mind-blowing work in there. So check that out. And so some three possible activities you can do here. We have like our block, and this is like a cross between social studies and art. So you can have students create illustrated maps of their own neighborhood or school community, and they can color code areas that are really important to them, whether it's parks, favorite restaurants, after school gathering spots, and then have them compare it to historical redlining maps. You can find that through the Mapping Inequality Project most times, and spark conversations about who gets to decide which neighborhoods are good and why. What is a good neighborhood? Why is this a good neighborhood? And really get kids talking about how, and you'll open up conversations against bias, discriminatory practices, racism, how all of that plays a part. The next idea, community time capsule interview, and that's where you get social studies and ELA together. Students can interview a family member, neighborhood or community elder about their neighborhood and what it used to look like and how it has changed. They can write or record a short then and now story modeled on Miss Effie's storytelling in Main Street or Ruby's scavenger hunt memories. And so there's they can even do a cool podcast about it as well. So like a then and now. The final idea, Save Our Spot, persuasive campaign, that's ELA and an art connection. Students can choose a real, preferably real or imagined local business or gathering place that matters to them, to their community, and create a persuasive poster or a letter or even a short video advocating for its preservation and connecting it connects to Ruby's real world campaign to keep that bakery open. And I can tell you, there's tons and tons of businesses, especially in the Houston area, that are being threatened. And I could a really cool way to extend, especially that part, is to, with parent permission, making sure this is in line with your district's rules, inviting these students out to local town halls, right? Reaching out to your news stations, getting their voices out there, teaching them, like these things are your civic duties, right? Standing up for small business, standing up for places that mean a lot to you. And so showing them how to be active community members and attending local meetings, electing town halls, reaching out to like people running for elections or whatever, people in your city council. So these projects, especially that persuasive campaign, Save Our Spot, can really have traction in like the larger scheme of things. All right, set 2. So this is one of my favorite reads. All right. And I encourage you to listen to the audiobook. It is the most hilarious thing ever. I just love it. So Arturo Zamora is spending his summer the way he typically does, surrounded by his family at his abuela's restaurant called La Cocina de la Isla. And it's in the heart of their Miami neighborhood in Canal Grove. He's writing poetry secretly because, boys don't write poetry. He's nursing a crush on this new girl in his spoken word class. He's trying to be cool about it, but he's really not. And then he's also soaking up all of his abuela's stories and recipes and just having a really good time being a young guy with his friends in the summer and all of that good stuff. However, we have this villain here. A real estate developer moves in with plans to demolish their neighborhood and build these luxury condos. And this threatens the life of his abuela's restaurant, right? And so he's trying to figure out, Arturo is trying to figure out what he's willing to fight for and how he's going to use his voice to do so. So it's a really warm, funny, deeply felt novel about food, family, poetry, and standing up for the place you call home. And what I like about it, it's also like you get to learn about a culture outside of America as well. And so especially now where we have certain cultures that are painted a certain way, and it's important to see that culture outside of all the political curtains that we have. And so how does legacy show up in the epic fail? So we see legacy in Abuela's recipes and her stories of Cuba and the cultural memory held inside the restaurant walls. And so as I was reading this, I think about the local restaurants that I go to in the Houston area and when I travel, and the older restaurants that have been like the foundation of communities. And you see all of the pictures of their kids and their grandkids and all of the movie stars and different people who have come to that restaurant and the stories and the richness, right? And so that's what Abuela's restaurant is like. For the community and for Arturo. And so it's that legacy, it's her legacy, it's her family's legacy. We see advocacy driving this plot as Arturo and his community organize against displacement, because this developer is not interested in working with the community to build his condos and maintain the character and culture. He is coming with pure displacement in the name of capitalism. We see gentrification as the central conflict. Again, he is coming to this neighborhood and basically erase it. He doesn't he pretends to care about the culture, but he does not. Our next read, running out of time here. So our next read, again, this is an older read, but again, connected. This is The Education of Margot Sanchez. Margot is desperately trying to fit in with her wealthy private school friends on the South Shore of Long Island. She'll do anything to blend in with those rich kids, even if that means running up her father's credit card bill. When her parents find out, her punishment is summer working at her family's supermarket. I used to do that in the South Bronx. Margot is mortified. Like, why am I even here? This is beneath me. But as she is in the community, seeing what her parents do and how this grocery store is like a key cornerstone, the loyal customers, and learning of the complicated dynamics of her family's business, she starts to see the Bronx and herself quite differently. Beneath the surface, her family's navigating the pressures of a changing neighborhood, and Margot has to decide who she really wants to be. So we see legacy tied to Margot's Puerto Rican family and the supermarket that anchors their identity in the community. We see gentrification. It simmers in the background as the neighborhood slowly changes. So as gentrification is creeping in, it's taking a toll on their family business, and they have to make a lot of decisions about their life and what do they do. And then Margot sees this firsthand because, remember, she was kind of shielded being away at her private school, and now she has this firsthand experience. We see advocacy emerging when Margot's growing into awareness. Like, she's moving from her self-interest, trying to fit in with the wealthy kids, to becoming more community conscious. And so what are some cross-curricular projects we can do with this? You can do spoken word, going back to Arturo, where you can have kids think about a place or a tradition, a community space that matters. A prompt could be like, what would you fight for? And they can, these pieces can address gentrification, cultural preservation, or personal legacy. You can host an open mic night on your campus, in your classroom, maybe even have them enter local competitions. I know Houston, if you're in Houston, there's a spoken word competition for high schoolers. The next project is like a larger cross-content one with math, social studies, and ELA, neighborhood economics investigation. So students begin to dive into like real estate and development, and then they can gather things like housing costs, building closures, demographic shifts, and write like a nice investigative feature, an article, or create an infographic that tells the story of change through numbers and narrative. And then the last one, another one with ELA, media literacy and social studies, before and after documentary short. Students and teams can create like a 3 to 5 minute mini docuseries about a local place that has changed or is at the risk of changing. They conduct interviews, gather archival photos or news clips, and narrate the story. The final product practices research, storytelling, and digital literacy while centering community, like real community voices. If your students don't have the capabilities of doing like this massive docuseries, photo essays, that's a good supplement here. So they can do a photo essay showing the before and after and really talking about change in their neighborhood. All right, gonna speed through here. We have about 7 minutes, and then I'll at the end kind of jump into the chat a little bit. Set 3, The Color of Law. So these last two books are more adult reads and kind of like give an overall foundation. I feel like as a teacher, I think you need to start with like the big adult reads, the nonfiction stuff, and then you have all of the language and that historical context when you introduce the reads for your students. And so The Color of Law, Rothstein dismantles the myth that residential segregation in America happened naturally by private choice. But through his meticulous research, he documents how federal, state, and local government policies, from the FHA and VA loans that excluded Black families to zoning laws, public housing decisions, and tax structures, have deliberately created and enforced racial segregation in every major American city. This is not ancient history, guys. It's really not. These policies have shaped, they continue to shape the neighborhoods we live in today, and their effects compound across generations. So this non-fiction book, I feel, contextualizes every other book in this list. And so in Rothstein's book, we see legacy here as systemic, dating back from the 1930s, the 1960s, and how all of these policies, these decisions made, have created such a great wealth gap in our communities and neighborhood inequalities that persist today. and how gentrification is reframed and its consequences of government engineered segregation. Something that really like I really want to zone in on that. In his book, advocacy is kind of implicit, right? So the argument is that if segregation was created by policy, it can be undone by policy, but we have to acknowledge that it happened, right? And so it's really important for us to continue to fight and call out discriminatory practices, vote for people who acknowledge these things and want to undo these harms. We can't keep voting for the same people over and over and expect change to happen, right? And so this book is it's a really good foundational start if you're going to kind of like talk about these topics with your students in the classroom. Our final book, Kuleana, this one, she's a journalist and she grew up in her family's ancestral land in the remote eastern shore of Maui. 90 acres of undeveloped rainforest, coastline, and massive centuries-old temple, all granted her to her ancestor, who was a king in, I think, 1848. However, when a property tax bill arrives with a 500% increase, the family now faces an impossible choice. Do they keep the land or do they sell to an offshore millionaire? What follows is Sarah's family's deeply personal journey back to Hawaii. She goes there, she reconnects with her relatives to reckon with the history of Hawaiian land loss, and really interrogating one's responsibility to place, culture, and family. And so basically legacy is the spine of this book. Ancestral land is really important, right? And so it's living inheritance, and it's not seen as real estate. Oh, you know, in some cultures, you pass land on, that's your money making thing. I'm gonna just have this land so my kids can sell it and make money. But in some cultures, land, you do not sell land because it's so much stories. Your ancestors are on this land, so much history is on this land, and it is your duty to preserve that history and pass and protect this land down from generation to generation. We see gentrification taking a toll, and that's very common in Hawaii, right? What's happening is, and not just Hawaii, a lot of tropical islands where I'm from as well, is that you have these billionaires coming in talking about tourism is going to help your island, but wanting the land. And if you give the land, then a lot of that, you know, changes. You start pricing out locals, and it just changes the whole dynamic. And so again, you see advocacy in fighting, like, do I keep my family's land? Do we sell it? I'm not going to
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Barker, but I want to make sure you get everything in. So we could do this for 2 hours, but I just want to give you a time warning. We need to be in 1 minute.
Okay. All right. So I'm not going to read these out to you, but you can take a quick picture, a snippet, whatever you want to do. Again, I do have some cross-curricular projects you can work on here. And that's pretty much it. I do encourage everyone to visit the gathering page and please support our charities, our sessions. This whole thing is free, but one thing we do encourage is to give back. Every session that we hold in the fall and the spring, our keynotes get to select charities, and we have some very meaningful charities here that need your love and support. So feel inclined to donate. Do share with your networks to get more eyes on these charities, and we really do thank you for being here and joining in with me on this book chat. And do stay for the rest of the day because we have some other book talks coming up and some amazing sessions. Janet, is there anything you'd like to say before we log off?
You kind of did my job for me, but thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to read those books. Some weren't familiar to me. So thank you all. As Dr. Barker said, please consider donating to the next charities or to the posted charities. And we look forward to seeing you at other sessions today. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.